The scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. "Morgan, what the hell have you done?" My voice echoed across the stable yard, sending birds scattering from the nearby oak trees. Blood rushed to my head, pounding in my ears as I stared at the open gate between the paddocks, a gate that should have been securely latched and locked. Morgan, my 19-year-old sister, looked up from her phone with a bored expression that made my blood boil even hotter. She was sitting on a hay bale, legs crossed, looking completely unconcerned as my prize mare Willow paced nervously in the same enclosure as Phantom, my ungelded stallion. "Relax, Emma," she said, rolling her eyes. "They're just horses, they're fine." I sprinted toward the paddock, moving faster than I'd thought possible. 20 years of horse breeding experience screamed warnings in my head. Willow was in season. Phantom was unneutered and aggressive toward other horses. This wasn't just a case of mixing animals that shouldn't be together. This was a recipe for disaster that could lead to serious injury or worse. "Get up now," I shouted, fumbling with the latch. "Get a lead rope from the tack room and help me separate them before." A sharp whinny cut through the air as Phantom reared, his massive hooves slicing through the space where Willow had been standing seconds before. My mare bolted to the far corner of the paddock, her eyes wide with panic, nostrils flaring. Morgan finally stood, but instead of helping, she took a step back. "God, you're overreacting. I was just taking photos for Instagram. The lighting is better in that paddock." I didn't have time to respond. Sliding into the enclosure, I moved slowly toward Willow, keeping my voice low and steady despite the rage and fear churning inside me. "Easy, girl. Easy now." Behind me, Phantom pawed at the ground, agitated. I could sense his building aggression. A stallion with a mare in heat, his territorial instincts fully activated. One wrong move and either horse could be seriously injured. Or me. "Call Tyler," I instructed Morgan without turning around. "Tell him it's an emergency." "Who?" "Tyler," I snapped. "The stable manager. His number is on the board in the office." I heard her huff but didn't look back. Every ounce of my attention was focused on reaching Willow, who was trembling against the fence. After what felt like an eternity, my fingers closed around her halter. Moving with deliberate slowness, I attached the lead rope and began guiding her toward the gate, positioning myself between her and Phantom, who was following us with predatory interest. We were almost at the gate when Phantom charged. I shoved Willow forward through the opening and spun around, raising my arms and shouting at the stallion, who skidded to a halt just feet away. His eyes were wild, nostrils flared, powerful muscles tensed under his gleaming black coat. "Morgan, the other gate!" I yelled, not daring to take my eyes off Phantom. Finally, my sister seemed to grasp the severity of the situation. She hurried to open the connecting gate to Phantom's original paddock. With careful, strategic movements, I managed to guide the agitated stallion away from Willow and back into his proper enclosure. The moment the latch clicked into place, I sagged against the fence post, my heart hammering. Willow was still packing nervously, her coat damp with sweat. I could see a thin scratch along her flank, nothing serious but enough to make my anger resurge. Tyler came running across the yard, his weathered face creased with concern. "What happened?" he asked, taking in the scene. "Morgan happened," I said, my voice tight with fury. "She put Willow and Phantom in together so she could take Instagram pictures." Tyler's eyes widened. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. He immediately went to check on Willow, his experienced hands running along her legs and body, searching for injuries. "Is it really that big a deal?" Morgan asked, crossing her arms defensively. "Nothing even happened." I turned to face her, trembling with an anger so profound it felt like ice in my veins. "Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Do you have any idea what could have occurred? Phantom could have killed Willow, or she could have broken a leg trying to get away from him. Do you understand what that would mean?" Morgan rolled her eyes. "You'd get insurance money and buy another horse." The casualness of her response struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't just ignorance. This was willful disregard for something I had devoted my entire life to. Willow wasn't just any horse. She was the cornerstone of my breeding program, the result of years of careful genetic selection. Her bloodline was exceptional, her temperament perfect. She was worth well over $75,000, but more than that, she was part of my future, my legacy, my everything. And Morgan had risked it all for a social media post. "Call Dr. Rivera," I told Tyler, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I want Willow checked out immediately." I already texted him, Tyler assured me. He'll be here in 20 minutes. I nodded, grateful for his efficiency, then turned back to my sister. You need to leave. Morgan's mouth fell open. Excuse me. You heard me. Pack your things and leave my farm now. You can't be serious, she scoffed. Where am I supposed to go? Back to Mom and Dad's? I'm on spring break. That's not my problem, I said coldly. You've been here 3 days, and you've broken every single rule I set. You've ignored feeding schedules, left gates open, brought strangers onto the property without permission, and now this. You deliberately put my horses in danger after I specifically told you never to open the gates between paddocks. It was a mistake, she protested, her voice rising. God, you're so dramatic. A mistake is forgetting to turn off a light. This was a choice, Morgan. You chose to ignore everything I told you because you wanted a photo. You risked my livelihood and the safety of my animals because you couldn't be bothered to respect basic rules. Morgan's face contorted, her expression shifting from defiance to the fake contrition she'd perfected over years of manipulating our parents. Emma, please, she said, her voice suddenly small. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't realize it was dangerous. I won't do it again. 3 years ago, that look might have worked on me. Even a year ago, I might have wavered. But I'd spent the last 12 months rebuilding my life after a devastating divorce, pouring everything I had into this farm. I'd learned the hard way what happened when you let people cross your boundaries without consequences. Your apology doesn't change anything, I said flatly. I want you gone before Dr. Rivera arrives. This is ridiculous, Morgan's facade cracked, revealing the petulant teenager beneath. I'm calling Mom. Go ahead, I replied, turning my attention back to Willow. Tell her why you're being kicked out. Be sure to explain how you almost got a $75,000 horse killed for your Instagram. Morgan stormed off toward the farmhouse, phone already pressed to her ear. I knew exactly what would happen next. She would give our mother a carefully edited version of events, painting herself as the victim of my unreasonable anger. Mom would call me, demand I forgive Morgan's little mistake, and the cycle would continue as it had for Morgan's entire life. Not this time. Dr. Rivera arrived promptly, his weathered face grim as I explained what had happened. He examined Willow thoroughly, checking the scratch on her flank and monitoring her for signs of stress. She seems physically okay, he said finally, but keep an eye on her for the next few days. Stress can manifest in various ways, and mares can be particularly sensitive when they're in season. I will, I promised, stroking Willow's neck. Thanks for coming so quickly, Javier. Of course, he hesitated, then added, I heard some shouting when I pulled in. Everything all right? I sighed. My sister. She's the one who put them together despite knowing better. I told her to leave. Dr. Rivera nodded, understanding in his eyes. In the 3 years he'd been my vet, he'd become something of a friend as well. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to enforce are with family, he said quietly. Tell me about it, I muttered. She's already called in the cavalry. My phone's been blowing up with messages from my parents. Want my professional opinion? He asked, packing up his medical bag. Please. What happened today could have been catastrophic if you hadn't intervened when you did. He shook his head. You have every right to protect your animals and your business. His validation strengthened my resolve. Thanks, Javier. Send me the bill as usual. Of course, he paused at the stable door. Don't back down, Emma. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. After he left, I checked my phone. 6 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and a dozen text messages ranging from concerned to angry. I ignored them all and helped Tyler settle the horses for the night, making sure Willow was comfortable in her stall with extra bedding and a mild sedative Dr. Rivera had prescribed. When I finally returned to the farmhouse, Morgan was gone, but the evidence of her stay remained scattered throughout my home. Wet towels on the bathroom floor, empty chip bags on the couch, makeup spilled across the guest bathroom counter. I cleaned mechanically, my mind churning with everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. My phone rang again, my mother. Taking a deep breath, I answered, Hello. Emma Jean Harper, what is wrong with you? Mom's voice was shrill with indignation. Morgan just arrived home in tears. How could you throw your own sister out? Did she tell you why I asked her to leave? I asked, keeping my voice level. She said you overreacted to a simple mistake with the horses. She was just taking photos, Emma. She's devastated. Of course, I should have expected nothing less. Mom, I said firmly, Morgan deliberately put Willow and Phantom in the same paddock after I explicitly told her never to open the connecting gates. Phantom is an aggressive stallion and Willow is in season. Do you understand what could have happened? Oh, honey, I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. Intent doesn't matter, I interrupted. The result is what matters. Willow could have been seriously injured or killed. My entire breeding program could have been compromised. This isn't just about horses, it's about my livelihood. You're being melodramatic, Mom scoffed. Nothing happened, and now Morgan's spring break is ruined because you couldn't forgive a simple error. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 silently. It wasn't an error, Mom. It was a deliberate choice. Morgan knew the rules and chose to ignore them, and it's not the first time. She's been here 3 days and has repeatedly disregarded everything I've told her. She's 19, Emma. Teenagers make mistakes. Yes, and they need to face consequences for those mistakes. That's how they learn. Mom's voice turned icy. I think you're just being cruel because you're jealous. You've always resented how easily things come to Morgan. The accusation stung, but I refused to be baited. Dr. Rivera has already been out to check Willow. I'll be forwarding his bill to you and Dad. What? Absolutely not. That's your business expense. No, Mom. The expense was incurred because of Morgan's actions. She's your responsibility, so the bill is yours. This is ridiculous. Wait until your father hears about this. I'm sure he already has, I said wearily. Look, I need to check on my horses. I'll email you Dr. Rivera's invoice when it comes. I hung up before she could respond, then immediately silenced my phone. Sitting at my kitchen table, I buried my face in my hands, exhaustion washing over me. This was only the beginning of the storm, and I knew it would get worse before it got better. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to bend. Not this time, not when it came to this. The next morning, I woke to 27 new texts and 11 voicemails. Most were from my parents, but a few were from extended family members who had already been fed the narrative that I was being unreasonable and cruel. I deleted them all without listening and focused on what needed to be done. Tyler arrived early, his face drawn with concern. How's Willow? He asked immediately. Restless, I admitted. I checked on her 3 times during the night. The scratch isn't deep, but she's still agitated. He nodded. I'll keep a close eye on her today. And Phantom. Calmer now that they're separated again. I poured us both coffee, grateful for his steady presence. Listen, Tyler, thank you for yesterday, for being here. No thanks needed, he said firmly. What Morgan did was dangerous and stupid. You had every right to send her packing. His support meant more than he knew. I'm afraid this is going to get ugly. My family doesn't exactly respect boundaries. Tyler's mouth twitched. I gathered that much from the few times I've met them, but this is your farm, Emma, your rules. Yeah, I said, staring into my coffee. My rules. After breakfast, I went to check the security cameras I'd installed the previous year after attack theft in the area. I hadn't thought to look at the footage yesterday, but now I was curious about exactly what had happened. The cameras covered most of the stable yard and paddocks. I rewound to the time shortly before I'd heard Willow's distressed whinny. There was Morgan, sauntering into the frame, phone in hand. She stopped at the connecting gate between the paddocks, looked around, clearly checking if anyone was watching, and then deliberately unlatched it. The footage showed her sliding the bolt back and swinging the gate open wide. What happened next made my blood run cold. Morgan didn't just open the gate. She actively herded Willow toward Phantom, using a rake to guide the reluctant mare into the stallion's paddock. Even worse, I could see her laughing as Phantom immediately became agitated, prancing and snorting at Willow's presence. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't ignorance. This was deliberate. I downloaded the footage to my laptop, my hands shaking with renewed anger. Then I reviewed the footage from the previous 2 days. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. Morgan had been breaking rules left and right, bringing 2 strangers onto the property after midnight, taking selfies while sitting on the fence of paddocks she'd been explicitly told to stay out of, even trying to ride one of my yearlings when she thought no one was looking. The final straw was watching her deliberately dump a feed supplement I used for my pregnant mares into the wrong feed bucket, rolling her eyes when Tyler called her out on it. then doing it again the moment his back was turned. I'd been right to kick her out. If anything, I should have done it sooner. With grim determination, I composed an email to my parents with the security footage attached. I wrote, "Mom and Dad, since you seem unconvinced that Morgan's actions were serious, I'm attaching security footage that shows exactly what happened. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. Morgan deliberately put my horses in danger after being explicitly told not to. I'm also attaching Dr. Rivera's invoice for $375. I expect payment within 30 days. This is not up for debate. Emma." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then headed out to the farmer's market. Saturday was my busiest day for selling the organic honey and lavender products that supplemented my income from the horse breeding. I needed the distraction of work, of normal conversation with customers who weren't accusing me of being cruel and unreasonable. I was halfway through setting up my booth when I spotted them, my parents and Morgan, walking purposefully in my direction. Mom's face was pinched with anger, Dad looked uncomfortable, and Morgan wore an expression of wounded innocence that made my stomach turn. "Emma," Mom called loudly enough that several nearby vendors turned to look. "We need to talk about this ridiculous situation." I continued arranging jars of honey, refusing to be intimidated. "This isn't the place, Mom." "Well, you're not answering your phone, so you've left us no choice," she huffed, stopping in front of my booth. "Your father and I watched that video, and frankly, I think you're blowing things completely out of proportion." I finally looked up, meeting her gaze steadily. "Are you serious? You saw Morgan deliberately putting my horses in danger, and you still think I'm overreacting?" "She's a teenager. She was taking photos. She was explicitly told never to open that gate. She knew exactly what she was doing." Dad stepped forward, ever the peacemaker. "Emma, honey, we understand you were upset, but sending her home seems extreme, and that vet bill is a direct result of Morgan's actions," I finished firmly, "and it's non-negotiable." Morgan pushed past our parents, her face a perfect mask of regret. "Emma, I said I was sorry. I didn't know it would be such a big deal. Please, can we just move past this? I promise I'll be more careful." "More careful?" I echoed, incredulous. "Morgan, the footage shows you deliberately herding Willow into Phantom's paddock. You knew exactly what you were doing." Morgan's facade cracked slightly, a flash of defiance crossing her features. "It's not my fault you're so uptight about your precious horses." "Those precious horses are my livelihood," I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. "You endangered them for social media content." "You're being dramatic," Mom interjected. "Nothing happened." "Nothing happened because I intervened," I corrected her. "If I hadn't been there." "But you were," Dad pointed out, as if that settled everything. "Look, Emma, we understand you're upset, but family forgives. Morgan wants to make amends. Can't you give her another chance?" I looked at the three of them. My mother's self-righteous indignation, my father's conflict-avoidant pleading, and Morgan's calculated performance of remorse, and something inside me hardened. For years, I'd been the one to bend, to forgive, to accommodate. I'd been the responsible one, the reasonable one, the one who would eventually cave to keep the peace. "Not this time." "No," I said, the word surprisingly easy to speak. "I can't." Morgan's eyes widened. "What?" I said no. "You're not welcome on my property, Morgan, not after this." "You can't be serious," Mom exclaimed. "She's your sister." "Yes, she is. And as her older sister, the best thing I can do is teach her that actions have consequences." Dad's expression darkened. "Emma Jean, you're being completely unreasonable." "No, Dad, I'm setting a boundary, something this family has never been good at respecting." "How dare you?" Mom hissed, her voice rising. "After everything we've done for you." "Is everything okay here?" The question came from Marlene Chen, owner of the vegetable stand next to mine and someone who had become a good friend over the last year. She stood beside my booth, arms crossed, concern evident in her eyes. "Everything's fine, Marlene," I assured her. "My family was just leaving." "We most certainly were not," Mom protested. "Emma, this conversation isn't over." "Yes, it is," I said firmly. "I have customers to serve. If you want to discuss this further, you can email me to set up a time, but Morgan is not welcome on my property, and that's final." Other vendors were watching now, some pretending not to listen, while others made no effort to hide their interest. I could see my father becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. "This isn't like you, Emma," he said quietly. "You've always been the forgiving one." "Maybe that's the problem," I replied. "Maybe I've forgiven too much for too long." Morgan, sensing she was losing the battle, resorted to tears, real ones this time, born of frustration rather than remorse. "I can't believe you're being so mean. It was just a stupid mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said, my patience wearing thin. "The security footage shows you deliberately doing something you were told not to do. Actions have consequences, Morgan. It's time you learned that." "Come on," Dad muttered, taking Mom's elbow. "This isn't the place." Mom shook him off. "I'm not leaving until Emma agrees to be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said calmly. "I'm protecting my business and my animals from someone who has proven she can't be trusted. That's not just reasonable, it's necessary." "You've changed," Mom accused, her face flushed with anger. "Ever since the divorce, you've been bitter and cold. Taking it out on your sister won't heal whatever's broken inside you, Emma." The low blow stung, but I refused to show it. "This has nothing to do with my divorce and everything to do with Morgan's actions. Now, please leave. I have a business to run." For a moment, I thought Mom might continue the scene, but Dad finally managed to steer her away, with Morgan trailing behind them, shooting venomous glances over her shoulder. I watched them go, my heart pounding but my resolve unchanged. "You okay?" Marlene asked softly. I nodded, though okay wasn't exactly accurate. "I will be." "Family stuff is the worst," she said sympathetically. "For what it's worth, I heard enough to know you're in the right." "Thanks," I murmured, grateful for the support. "It's complicated." Marlene squeezed my arm. "Isn't it always? Listen, I've got customers, but I'm right next door if you need anything." As she walked away, I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. The confrontation had left me shaken, but also strangely liberated. For the first time in my life, I had held firm against my family's manipulation tactics. It wouldn't be the last battle, but it was a start. The following week passed in a blur of work and ignored messages. My father sent an email reluctantly agreeing to pay Dr. Rivera's bill, but with a lengthy addendum about how disappointed he was in my unforgiving attitude. My mother vacillated between angry texts and tearful voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart. Morgan alternated between vicious social media posts vaguely referencing toxic family members and plaintive messages begging for another chance. I responded to none of it, focusing instead on my horses and my business. Willow recovered from her ordeal, though she remained skittish for several days. I threw myself into work, grateful for the physical exhaustion that helped me sleep despite the emotional turmoil. Tyler was a steadfast presence, never prying but always supportive. "Your sister posted another sob story on Instagram," he mentioned one morning as we mucked out stalls. "Something about how some people can't accept a sincere apology." I snorted. Nothing about Morgan's apology was sincere. "I know that and you know that," he agreed, leaning on his pitchfork. "How are you holding up with all this family drama?" I considered the question. "Better than I expected, actually. It's freeing in a way. I've spent so many years being the peacemaker, the one who bends to keep everyone happy. Standing my ground feels right, even if it's hard." Tyler nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same." A week and a half after the incident, my father called with a proposal. Dinner at Riverbend Steakhouse, neutral territory for a family discussion. I agreed, but only after making it clear that my position regarding Morgan wasn't up for negotiation. The restaurant was busy when I arrived, the din of conversation providing a buffer of white noise that I hoped would keep things civil. My parents had chosen a corner booth, with Morgan already seated beside Mom. Dad stood to greet me with an awkward hug, but Mom and Morgan remained seated, their expressions guarded. "Thanks for coming," Dad said as I slid into the booth opposite them. "We thought it would be good to clear the air." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "I appreciate that." A server took our drink orders, and then an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Emma, we've been talking, and we think we've come up with a solution that works for everyone." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. Mom leaned forward, her expression earnest. "We understand you were upset about what happened with your horses. No one's disputing that Morgan made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I interrupted quietly. It was a deliberate choice. Morgan's face flushed. Are you ever going to let this go? I said I was sorry like a million times. Saying sorry doesn't erase what happened, I replied evenly. And it doesn't change the fact that you knowingly put my animals in danger after being explicitly told not to. Dad held up his hands placatingly. Let's not rehash all that. We're here to move forward, right? So here's what we're thinking. Morgan will write you a formal apology, and in return, you'll allow her to visit the farm again, with supervision, of course. I stared at him, incredulous. That's your solution. It's a compromise, Mom said, as if that explained everything. Morgan acknowledges she was wrong, and you get the apology you obviously want. I never said I wanted an apology, I pointed out. I said Morgan isn't welcome on my property. That's unreasonable, Mom snapped. She's your sister. Being family doesn't give her the right to endanger my livelihood. Morgan rolled her eyes dramatically. God, you're still being so melodramatic. Nothing even happened to your stupid horses. Because I intervened, I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger rising inside me. If I hadn't been there. But you were, Dad interjected quickly. Look, Emma, we're trying to find a middle ground here. Morgan is young, she made a poor choice, but holding this grudge isn't healthy for anyone. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I'm not holding a grudge, I'm enforcing a boundary. There's a difference. Boundaries, Mom scoffed. You've been talking to that therapist again, haven't you? All this boundary nonsense is just an excuse to be selfish. It's not selfish to protect what's mine, I said quietly. We're your family, Morgan burst out. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not remorse but entitlement. She genuinely believed she deserved forgiveness simply because we shared blood, regardless of her actions or the potential consequences. Family counts for a lot, I acknowledged, but it doesn't give you a free pass to ignore my rules, endanger my animals, and then expect no consequences. Dad sighed heavily. What do you want, Emma? What will it take to resolve this? I had been waiting for this question. I have 3 non-negotiable conditions, I said firmly. First, payment of Dr. Rivera's bill in full, which you've already agreed to, so thank you for that. Dad nodded stiffly. Second, a public apology from Morgan. Not just to me privately, but on the same social media platforms where she's been painting herself as the victim. Morgan's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I am completely serious, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. You publicly misrepresented what happened. You need to publicly correct it. That's humiliating, she protested. Actions have consequences, I repeated, the phrase becoming something of a mantra. And the third condition? Dad asked, his expression grim. Complete respect for my property and business boundaries going forward. That means Morgan doesn't set foot on my farm without explicit invitation, doesn't talk about my business on social media, and doesn't use our family connections to undermine me professionally. Mom's face had grown increasingly red as I spoke. This is ridiculous. You're treating your sister like a criminal over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I corrected her. It was the culmination of a pattern of disrespect that's gone on for years, and I'm not treating her like a criminal. I'm treating her like an adult who needs to take responsibility for her actions. So that's it, Morgan demanded, her voice rising. I either humiliate myself online or you never forgive me. I already forgive you, I said simply. Forgiveness and boundaries are not mutually exclusive. I can forgive you and still require accountability. This is not how family treats each other, Mom declared, her voice trembling with anger. I raised you better than this, Emma Jean. You raised me to be responsible and to stand up for myself, I pointed out. That's exactly what I'm doing. The server arrived with our drinks, momentarily pausing the conversation. After he left, promising to return for our food orders, Dad leaned forward, his expression serious. Emma, be reasonable. Morgan's public apology is off the table. It would damage her reputation. Her reputation, I echoed, incredulous. What about my reputation? What about the fact that half our extended family now thinks I'm a heartless monster because of the story she told? That's different, Mom dismissed. Family gossip isn't the same as something posted online for everyone to see. I shook my head, a sad smile touching my lips. You know what? It doesn't matter. My conditions stand. If Morgan isn't willing to take public accountability for her actions, then we have nothing more to discuss. So that's it, Morgan demanded, tears welling in her eyes. Whether from genuine emotion or calculation, I couldn't tell anymore. You're choosing your stupid horses over your own sister. I'm choosing to value myself enough to enforce consequences, I corrected her. Something this family has never been good at. Dad's expression hardened. I think you need to reconsider your position, Emma. This stubbornness of yours is going to cost you more than you realize. The threat was veiled but clear. If I didn't cave, if I didn't forgive and forget on their terms, there would be wider ramifications within the family. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I taking this too far? Was I risking my entire family relationship over one incident? But then I remembered the security footage, Morgan deliberately herding Willow toward Phantom, laughing as the stallion became agitated. I remembered the thousands of dollars and countless hours I'd invested in my breeding program, all put at risk by her selfish actions. I remembered the years of being the one who always compromised, always forgave, always accommodated. Not this time. I've stated my conditions, I said calmly. They're non-negotiable. If you can't accept them, then I think we're done here. Mom slammed her hand on the table, causing heads to turn at nearby tables. You ungrateful, after everything we've done for you? Your father and I have supported you through every mistake, every failure, and this is how you repay us, by turning your back on your sister over something so trivial. It wasn't trivial to me, I said quietly. And that's the problem. None of you respect what matters to me. I slid out of the booth, grabbing my purse. I think it's best if I go. Dad, please send me confirmation when Dr. Rivera's bill is paid. Emma, don't you dare walk away from this table, Mom hissed, her face mottled with anger. I paused, looking at each of them in turn. My mother's fury, my father's disappointment, Morgan's calculated tears. For a moment, I felt a pang of something like grief for the family I'd always wanted but never truly had. I'm not walking away from the table, I said finally. I'm walking away from the manipulation. When you're ready to respect my boundaries, you know how to reach me. With that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, feeling lighter with each step. By the time I reached my truck, I was breathing easier than I had in weeks. It wasn't over, family drama never really is, but I had finally drawn a line in the sand. And for the first time in my life, I knew I wouldn't be the one to cross it. A year passed, seasons changing from spring to summer to fall to winter and back to spring again. The farm thrived under my care, with Willow producing a stunning filly that carried all her best traits. Dr. Rivera pronounced the foal one of the finest he'd seen in years, validating my breeding program in ways that filled me with pride. The family situation had evolved in unexpected ways. My father paid Dr. Rivera's bill promptly, but included a letter expressing his disappointment in my unforgiving nature. My mother vacillated between angry silence and tearful attempts at reconciliation that always circled back to me apologizing and allowing Morgan back into my life unconditionally. Morgan herself had gone through phases, first righteous indignation on social media, carefully worded to paint herself as the